You must be careful about the words you use, or the words you allow to be used in your house. Words are things. You must be careful. Careful about calling people out of their names, using racial pejoratives and sexual pejoratives and all that ignorance. Don't do that.
It's time to talk about it.
Pull up a chair and take a seat.
We're serving up recipes for life.
With Hampton University's Dr. Richard Mason and Dr. Tamara Williams.
Welcome to the Sunday Brunch.
This is Dr. Tamara Williams.
And this is Dr. Richard Mason. And welcome to the table. Sunday Brunch with the good doctors, the most delicious hour in radio.
The good doctors, indeed.
So how's everything going?
Looks like you started breakfast and brunch without me, bro.
Listen, let me tell you, I got here a little early, so I fixed me a little something on the side.
You were asking how the week's been going. It's been a busy week. Non-stop. Even though we are not supposed to be up in this place, I feel like we are still up in this place.
Listen, all day, every day. But it's what we do, and certainly wouldn't have it any other way. It's stuff that needs to be done. And guess what? When you always look at stuff that needs to be done, sometimes you might be the one that needs to do it. So here we are.
It seems like we always the one that have to do it, right? But this is the part that we love. At the end of our week, being able to gather and have conversations is always going to be something going on. So it's nice to be at the table and to even control who's at your table.
Exactly. Have some great conversations about what's going on in the lives of the people around us and how people can be inspired, and sometimes just talking about some of the challenges, but then how people have had some triumphs and victories as well. So it does my heart well when we're out and about in the community and people are talking about the show, and especially some of the topics, because we cover a vast majority of things, especially as it relates to mental health. And a lot of times these things aren't talked about, but people recognize, wait a minute, I've been dealing with this, and I may need to, seek some help or talk to somebody about this or whatever, so I think it normalizes a lot of things. And it's been great. I've certainly, enjoyed sitting at the table.
I want us to continue with that conversation too. I think it goes right along with what we'll be talking about today. Is that a lot of us, you say they're in the communities and people are talking about they're enjoying our conversation and mental health pieces. What I'm noticing now is a lot of us are more in tune with mortality.
Yes.
And, people leaving and more specifically our own mortalities.
Yes. We're finding that we're in the second half of this game. You know what I'm saying? You find out
some of us, yes.
Halftime is over.
Fourth quarter, yes.
Some of us in third and fourth quarter. But the blessing is actually getting to the third and fourth quarter, because there's some who didn't make it out of the first quarter, some who struggled in the second quarter. But you start thinking about where you are.
And the quality of life is different for a lot of people, that even though they're still in it, they don't really feel like they're in it. And so there's so much conversation to be had.
Exactly. So, but here, once again, here we are, and we're still doing some great things and having some great conversations at the table with folks. So.
Absolutely. And I think today is going to be no different than all our other days. We have for us at the table with us today, we have Professor Singleton. We don't always get to bring all of our professors. There's so many of us at Hampton University. There's no way that we can have every single professor on the show, but every now and then we're able to grab a couple, and it's really timely. And so I wanted to definitely have a conversation, been meaning to have a sit down with Professor Singleton. We work on the same building, on the same floor all the time. We pass each other up and down the steps. We share students, colleagues in many ways, but we haven't really had a chance to sit and have a good conversation. So I wanted to invite Professor Singleton to our show today.
Yes, welcome to the table, Professor Singleton.
Thank you all for having me. I'm delighted to be here today.
That's good. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Where are you from?
All right. Actually, I'm from right here in Hampton. I grew up in Hampton.
Okay.
Graduated from Phoebus High School.
Really?
Yes, my paternal grandparents are buried right behind the football stadium here on campus. My grandfather was a veteran of World War One. His name was George Singleton, and his gravestone is right out there in the cemetery.
Many of us don't make it to that cemetery, so that is amazing.
Yes, so
Okay,
I am indeed a Hampton man.
Hamptonian, yeah.
In terms of my background, I graduated from Norfolk State with
Hmm.
a degree in history education, and
Give me
then
1 second, Professor, singing it. Why boo you? Boo! I always boo Norfolk State, but go ahead, continue.
and,
But
and then you're going to boo me again because then I went to Old Dominion University and got a master's degree in history
Hmm.
education,
Hmm.
and then I proceeded to get into the public school system. And
Okay.
I taught for 11 years
Hmm.
at Booker T. Washington High School in Norfolk. And
Okay.
then I taught for 19 years at Indian River High School in Chesapeake, all
Hmm.
teaching social studies. And then I taught for 5 years at Chesapeake Juvenile Services, which is essentially the
alternative
Hampton Roads.
school.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, actually, it's the regional jail for
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
juveniles. And we serviced Portsmouth, Suffolk, Isle of Wight,
Hmm.
and a bunch of other areas. So I have a wide variety of experiences in education. Also, I worked for 15 years as a mental health tech at Virginia Beach Psychiatric Center.
Now, I
And
didn't know
You
that.
hear what I said? I told you we had to have them at the table because
Oh,
you're around people you don't even know who they are
yeah.
around on a
yeah,
day-to-day
so I'm
basis.
well familiar with folks who have been TDO'd and the
Oh,
Hmm.
wow.
doctors giving them the older drugs such as Haldol
Hmm.
versus some of the newer medications.
Hmm.
And also, I um, I worked for 20 years
All these
as
years,
an
you hearing all
adjunct.
these years? 15,
Right.
Yes,
20,
I was
18.
the adjunct professor at St. Leo University, the
Yeah.
Hampton
Hmm.
Roads Center, until they closed their doors here.
Mm.
And I've been working for about 15 years as the community affairs reporter with the New Journal and Guide newspaper.
Okay.
So,
So you're a journalist as well. So
yes,
I've seen
ma'am.
you in the community taking pictures, and now I have a clear understanding. I thought you were gathering this data as a historian, like you were,
Hmm.
in that regards, but I hear you. Okay.
Yeah,
Yes,
so
you're doing it all.
15 years, 18 years, and all those years had to be overlapping too. So this man is working multiple jobs at one time.
yes, and my service with the public schools totaled 35 years.
All
Then
right.
I retired, and I
Mm-hmm.
stayed retired exactly 2 weeks. And then
It didn't work for you.
Dean Dickerson asked me to join the Hampton University family, and I eagerly accepted. And
Listen, Mrs.
Welcome
Singer,
home.
Professor Singer, don't tell anybody you retired for 2 weeks. That was just a vacation. That's not retirement because you just
I don't
kept it
even
going.
know.
yes, sir.
No,
Yes,
no. I'm
sir.
the only thing retired about that is you receiving a check. And so
That's
to God be
it.
the
That's
glory on that.
A-
That's how you know you're actually retired.
Absolutely. And once I retired, um, uh, I married Elaine Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Today she's Elaine Williams Singleton,
Mm-hmm.
and we reside in Suffolk, Virginia.
Okay, okay,
Okay.
all right. Well, first of all, thank you so much. When I hear about the commitment people make to public education, first of all,
Thank you,
Yeah.
sir.
thank you so much for that because that is a strong commitment there. So thank you for the number of years that you spent in public education. But I want to ask you, I guess, what drew you to social studies? And
History,
how did
yeah.
you get into that history component as far as your background and your desire?
I always tell the joke. I
Uh-huh.
think I got
Uh-oh.
into social studies because I read too many comic books when I was a kid. Um,
Really?
but reading is very important, and I don't see young people reading comic books today.
Hmm.
And My mother was an elementary school teacher. She taught second grade for 30 years. And I had an aunt who was also an elementary school teacher. So it's in my background.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoyed it. I think I had a very good teacher, and it was middle school back then.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to, it was at the time, it was Spratley
Mm-hmm.
Junior
Yeah.
High. And I had a very good social studies teacher, and she encouraged me. And one day I ran into my fifth grade teacher, and I told her that I had gone on to become a history teacher, and she was very delighted. And I
Mm-hmm.
told her, I said, I think I'm paying the price today. I'm being paid back for all of the days I misbehaved in your class. I'm getting it back today twofold. So we had a good laugh about that. But no, I didn't misbehave in school. I
I was
was a
about to
good
say I
kid.
don't foresee that happening. When I tell you this man is one of the first one to arrive, one of the I see him in all different times.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
know that he's dedicated to what he's doing. And I've heard great things from the students. So you definitely are engaged.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Thank
this
Mm-hmm.
you.
is
Thank you,
yeah.
ma'am.
So you saying that you cutting up, I don't foresee that.
So tell
Nah.
us, in terms of the part being on campus, what is it that you enjoy about being on campus because you're committed here, in terms of the history, the social studies, the teaching and stuff like that or whatever. What is it that drives you every day on campus?
The
Being
retired
a
you.
Yes, I think what really motivates me is the desire um, to be of service to the university and to be
Mm-hmm.
a servant to the African American community.
Mm-hmm.
Those things, weigh heavily on me each day, and I love what I do. It was an easy transition for me
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of the things that I do in class with thinking maps and Venn diagrams. Um,
Mm-hmm.
uh, they seem to really resonate with our students because, for one thing, using the Venn diagrams, that's an area in my class where they can use AI and to get the
Mm-hmm.
assignment completed, and I don't have to worry about plagiarism or anything like that. And then
Mm-hmm.
we go over the assignments together.
Mm-hmm.
They're able to translate um, older topics into things that become more meaningful to them. For
Mm-hmm.
example, we did a thinking map on the transatlantic slave trade. And one of the questions on the diagram was ways to describe this event. And some of my students cleverly came up with the ideas that the transatlantic slave trade involved forced migration. It involved human trafficking. And
Mm-hmm.
those are just terms that we just don't associate with
They weren't available then.
then.
Yeah.
But today, if we put it in a more of a modern context, it makes more sense to them. And so they're able to complete these assignments and feel like that the assignments are meaningful to them and that they can relate to those types of assignments.
Mm-hmm.
Do you go through the things that are happening politically around us and bring that into class, or is it all the things that have happened historically?
Kind
Both.
of a mixture of both. If I can tell them a story um, that they can relate to, then they get the idea, they get the concept. Um, I've I've learned in my experiences that the best teachers, the best preachers are people who can tell a story and the students can relate to them.
Mm-hmm.
For example, one of the things that I'm going to tell the students is the story about the cup and the saucer.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I like to tell them here at Hampton University, we're like the story of the cup and the saucer.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone cannot be inside the cup. but when you're part of the saucer, you catch the blessings of the overflow.
Oh, all right.
So the students they can relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
Another quick story I was going to tell them was I call it Hampton University, Michelangelo, and the statue of David. What happened with this is Michelangelo had a big block of granite delivered to his home, and a little boy watched him for days and nights, steadily chipping away at the block of granite until it became the statue of David. And
Mm-hmm.
then when he finished, the little boy asked Michelangelo a question, and he said to him, "How did you know he was in there?" And I look at that as being the role of Hampton University. Um,
Mm.
the students come to us just like a block of granite, and it's
Mm-hmm.
up to the administrators and the professors and the faculty to help shape and mold them and help them become, better citizens, better people, and servants to the community. So I try to relate stories like that
Mm-hmm.
to them because that gives our mission here at HU a little more context and a little more depth and
I
something
Mm-hmm.
that
like
they can
that.
relate to.
Uh-huh. And you know what?
I like that.
I listen
Thank you.
to people as they talk about different things, they relate certain things and whatever. When you start talking about that block of granite, but the question is profound in that. How did you know that he was in there? That's
Yes, sir.
profound. That you,
Yeah.
as they say, that one will preach all by itself.
It's speaking to the expectations of
Yes.
what we expect from our students. I'm
Mm-hmm.
heading into my 19th year here at Hampton, and I tell people all the time that I continue to sign my contracts because of who I'm teaching here.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
excitement that comes from that is what we expect from them, what we do see in them. One of my best mentors told me that your mentors that your friends love you just the way you are, but your
Mm-hmm.
mentors love you too much to leave you where you are. And so
Mm-hmm.
when you're looking at that granny, you're seeing that block. I see, just art
Mm-hmm.
in the initial phase, but you're able to not leave them where they are as that block. You're able to chip away and show them different
Mm-hmm.
experiences. And for me, it's the expectation. I expect greatness. I
Mm-hmm.
don't expect mess. And so a lot of times if you go to other places where people have different understandings of what you can and cannot do based on their own stereotypes, they may not expect much from you. But here at Hampton, when we say the standard of excellence, we expect a lot from our students and we expect
Mm-hmm.
what we should expect. We expect them to do well. And we don't expect the excuses
Mm-hmm.
or any of the other extraness. There's going to be things that happen in your life, but we still expect you to
Mm-hmm.
rise up and do well. And I find even research supports us that when we have expectations for our students, they can meet them.
Mm-hmm.
They can
Yes.
meet them. It's when you don't have any for them that no one can meet a goal. You can't meet a goal when you don't know which way you're aiming.
Right, exactly. That's the way we've been solving the achievement gap. You know,
Mhm.
you raise expectations, but also you provide resources, and so therefore you're lifting that lower part of the regimen up to meet those expectations. You continue to set those high goals and those high standards at the same time that you're trying to close that achievement gap at the same time. And so that's certainly a benefit and a blessing and what we've seen here at Hampton through the years. But what's interesting for me is I hear it all the time as relates to some of the things historically that we've dealt with and being a history professor, trying to get them to understand certain things,
The importance of it.
exactly. Sometimes they look at the issues of slavery, segregation, and stuff like that, or whatever, because they've grown up in a world of haves and not necessarily have-nots in certain situations and all. So, as a history professor, how do you get students engaged in the historical perspective of life and who we are? How do you get them to that place?
Well, something that you just alluded to, you have to get them to understand that they have blessings that their foreparents did not.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I used to joke with Professor Robert Watson that the students in my class, because I'm in MLK, and sometimes the air conditioning is a little
A challenge.
there's a
Mm-hmm.
challenge from time to time. And so I told him, I said, they don't come to my class anymore and complain about it's too hot in the
Mm-hmm.
classroom because when they did that, I would tell them it was hotter than this on the slave ship.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
was hotter than this on the plantation.
I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't have made I couldn't have
Don't
made
come
it.
to my class and complain about it's too hot. Think about
Mm-hmm.
your foreparents. You
Mm-hmm.
know, uh, they had to deal with all of this. So
They didn't have an option.
they
Yeah.
get a little bit quiet when
Mm-hmm.
tell them that, and because
Mm-hmm.
it makes them think. Um,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we have been doing in my class, my History 107 class, which is a survey of African American studies, and I've also been blessed. Um, Going forward with the next semester coming up, I was asked to teach the new course, African American Studies
Mm-hmm.
220. And one of the things that I'm incorporating into both of those classes is the use of the census of 1950. And the students have to go into the census, and it's online, it's free, and they have to find me a relative who was living in 1950. It doesn't matter if they're deceased today. They have to
Mm-hmm.
be alive and in 1950 and part of that census. Now, of course, I have some international students, and so that may be a bit more of a challenge. So I give them alternatives. They can find a funeral program, or if they have a death certificate of someone, and the
Mm-hmm.
certificate said that they were alive. And I would tell them, create a PowerPoint, put that document into PowerPoint, um, put some pictures of this relative in the PowerPoint, and then tell us their story. And
Mm-hmm.
by doing this, they're checking all the boxes. They're doing historical research using primary sources, and they're brushing up on their public speaking skills. And I always would tell them something that Professor Watson would always say, and that is, there's no greater honor than
Mm-hmm.
being your family's historian. Because with this assignment, it forces some of them to go back and reach out to relatives and
Mm-hmm.
uh, and ask questions. And I tell them, with your relatives who knew these folks, I said, to you, the people may be deceased, but to those relatives, they're still very much alive, and they carry them around with them every
Mm-hmm.
day. And I asked the students, how many of y'all got more than what you bargained for
Mm-hmm.
when you asked your relative uh, that you were doing asked your relative to help you with this project
Mm-hmm.
in my class, and this just about the whole class would raise their hand because they got a history lesson that they
Mm-hmm.
hadn't had,
Mhm.
and
That was a blessing, a way to tap in those generations together and get them to
Mm-hmm.
communicate. I can imagine the excitement that came about.
Mm-hmm.
yes, and it's a lot of good information that can be pulled from that census. It tells you
Mm-hmm.
the degree of education, even their addresses,
Mm-hmm.
their age, occupation. Also,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of good information that I can mention in class. Like this is about the last generation that was
Mm-hmm.
born at home,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm.
right after that, African Americans and other groups were being born more at hospitals now instead of midwife,
Having a
using a
midwife. Mhm.
midwife.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So there are some telltale signs in that census that we can gather.
Professor, is there any topics in history that you tend to linger on? So, or you tend to research specifically, or is like your great love? There's so much. Our history is so rich. Is there something that gets your lights going and you like to focus on specifically?
Dr. King.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Dr. King, and
Mm-hmm.
always try to tie him into the university, which is very easy during this holiday because there are pictures on the internet where he visited HU. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of times the students don't know that his mother is a graduate of Hampton University.
See, that's why we
Also,
need to have you here on the show.
Mm-hmm.
That's good
yes, his
history.
mom is a graduate of HU or HI at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and Rosa Parks
Mm-hmm.
worked at was a hostess at the Holly Tree Inn
Mm-hmm.
cafeteria for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to tie all of that in, and let them know we own Dr. King.
Mm-hmm.
He has ties to HU,
You said not just Morehouse.
not just Morehouse.
Okay.
Exactly, exactly. But the plus is, when I was at Hampton, there was a professor there, Dr. Vernon Johnson. And much like yourself, he tied us to history. I took African American studies under him, and he did things very similar to what you're talking about in terms of connecting assignments where we had to reach out to our grandparents and our
Yes.
parents and find out information and stuff like that or whatever. But one of the things that I really liked about Dr. Johnson, his lectures were more like stories. It was almost like story time. And he would always end class with a cliffhanger. And he would, we're sitting there, well, what happened? What's going on? And we didn't want to leave class. And he
You
was
had to
like,
come back the next time to get the.
I'll see you next class. You know what I mean?
Oh
And
man.
he was that kind of professor, and he never raised his voice or anything like that. Like I said, it was just story time. And when he started talking, it's almost like the teacher who get silent so you're leaning forward some, that you're tuned in just a little bit more. And I was never really a history person, but I really enjoyed his class because it put me in a place. I enjoyed, of course, talking to my grandparents and talking about different things and stuff like that or whatever, but it put me in a place that for different assignments I had to reach out to my grandmother and ask questions, And so for me, it tied, the civil rights movement and things of that nature to the era that my grandparents lived in, because of course we experienced racism, of course, but it wasn't the same. But it gave me a sense of understanding by having those conversations and being able to open those dialogues. And so when people talk about this generation now, how they really don't understand or they don't feel connected, quote unquote, to the movement, and their movements are different, but they still have to understand the principles and the concepts of from whence we've come, and how do we get them there. And so I applaud you certainly for that, the use of that technique, because it's not easy. That I can say, it is certainly not easy in terms of making that connection for our young people, And so teaching Gen Z is really interesting, and so
Yes, it is a challenge sometimes.
And they
yeah.
have more to remember because we've lived a little bit longer at this point.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so tapping them in and helping them to understand that if we don't understand what happened, we're destined to repeat it, which we find ourselves in
Hmm.
right now, repeating some of these things because people didn't learn the first time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
One time, I showed the students the old Disney cartoon, The Headless Horseman.
Hmm.
Mm.
And they could never, and this was right at Halloween.
Hmm.
And they thought, I was playing some type of trick or game on
Hmm.
them. And after I showed them the little cartoon, I asked them some questions to make them think. And I
Hmm.
asked the question, who was the headless horseman? And then they
Hmm.
would say Ichabod Crane and all of these other people.
Hmm.
Uh, and I said, no. I said, you are the headless horseman.
Hmm. Hmm.
A lot
Oh,
of
snap.
African Americans are the headless horsemen.
Hmm.
Why?
That was my next
Because
question,
we,
Professor. So you're
why?
You see me tap
Be-
in. I'm all the way tapped in. Like,
look,
teach
I'm
me
I'm
what?
leaned in now.
Hello. They
Why?
want you to think.
Because we do things without thinking.
Hmm.
That's
Mm.
why in this cartoon, we are the headless horsemen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The students, you guys, y'all are the headless horsemen. Because a lot of times you do things without thinking. And
Mm-hmm.
then I asked
Mm-hmm.
them, uh, was the headless horseman full of self-hatred?
Mm.
They didn't know. And I said, yes, he was full of self-hatred. Think about
Mm-hmm.
it. He wanted anybody's head except his own.
Mm.
So that shows you he did not like himself. And so then that allows me to tap into some things like, you know, you
Your
got
mental
to
health
applaud
background.
yourself.
Well, that's what I said. That
Uh-huh.
mental
You got to
health piece.
salute
That mental
yourself.
it starts to build in and
Mm-hmm.
flourish right there. And that you got to applaud yourself. You have to encourage yourself. You have to understand yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You
Right,
have
because
to
I
esteem yourself. That's why they call it self-esteem.
that's
Mm-hmm.
right, because I tell them if you're waiting for our folks to congratulate you, I said you're going to be waiting
Don't hold your breath, baby.
a very
That's a
long
whole nother.
time.
That's a
Don't
whole
hold
nother
your
show.
breath, baby. You be waiting for the rest of your life and somebody else's too.
Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there are lessons, that can be pulled
Mm-hmm.
from that. Also, Bing Crosby, um, his singing style, he borrowed from Louis Armstrong,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
with the scatting and all of that. So
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of things that I can pull out of that, right around that particular time. So it
Mm-hmm.
just makes them think. So they
Mm-hmm.
walk out the classroom with a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And appreciation.
And
Right.
appreciation, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Even when we think about
Absolutely.
education, I talk to my students in the class like education is a little bit different in how people see and view those things. And
Mm-hmm.
um, some of the things that I would never have done as a student, I wouldn't show up late. I wouldn't show, certain things I wouldn't even be asking for extensions or, I'd be mortified to not be in class prepared when everybody else is coming prepared. And then to hear some of the things that they deal with now, some of the challenges they have, we have an awesome responsibility to not allow them to go backwards, but to definitely be pushing them forwards and getting
Mm-hmm.
them prepared. And so I'm glad that you're in the classroom showing them how to make the steps so that you're really teaching them how to fish so they can feed themselves and
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
showing them
ma'am.
where it comes from so that they can then repeat this process again, this level of thinking again, this outside of the box understanding, and then associating before to now so they know what not to do later. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it takes a lot.
Well, let me ask you this, because one of the things that has come up, and as we talk about young folks and understanding the historical context of things, celebrating July 4th versus Juneteenth. That was one of the conversations that I just had recently with some folks, in terms of, do you continue to celebrate 4th of July? Do you just celebrate Juneteenth and all or whatever? What's your perspective on July 4th celebration, Independence Day celebrations, and Juneteenth?
He just
Um,
put you out
in,
there.
in class, we call that the paradox of slavery and freedom. We had
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
colonists who complained of being slaves to King George III, while at the same time they owned slaves. And then the other paradox was that you had slaves who were fighting for the freedom of their owners, while they themselves were not free.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, we should celebrate it because um, African Americans helped win that war
Mm-hmm.
and help gain freedom for the colonists.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of Juneteenth, I related it this way. I had them do a comparison, contrast between the immigrants who were coming into the country by way of Ellis Island and
Mm-hmm.
those who came to America on the slave ship.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to them, with the Juneteenth holiday, the deeper meaning is these folks in Galveston, Texas worked for 2 years, provided 2 years of free labor, and they didn't know that they had
They
been
were already
free.
free.
Right. So
Mm-hmm.
I use
Mm-hmm.
that to relate to them that this is why we need to watch the news and we need to stay informed. We need
Mm-hmm.
to stay woke. And I
Mm-hmm.
explained that word too. But we need to stay aware. So that way no one can trick us, no one can fool us.
And we need
And
to keep having these conversations so that
right,
history is not rewritten and
and
people change the narrative.
right, and the immigrants came to America voluntarily. The folks on
Mm-hmm.
that slave ship came involuntarily.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why we need to celebrate Juneteenth, because we all helped build America, but we need to remember that there were a certain group of folks who came here against their will, and
Mm-hmm.
they helped build this country. And that's why we need to remember and celebrate Juneteenth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm a
And see,
fan of Juneteenth. I do not celebrate the 4th of July. I'm gonna be honest. And even though we fought, I feel like we weren't free. And even today, I don't feel free on some days. So,
mm-hmm.
a lot of days as we start moving into all these rights that are being rescinded and all these things that we thought was just understood is no longer understood. So,
Mm-hmm.
it is difficult because, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, we've been a part of every aspect of history,
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah,
That's
every
correct.
exactly.
aspect.
Mm-hmm. You know, and here's a gotcha because as I look at, certain administrations and how they have gone through the mindset of changing history, what is it that we're teaching in the classrooms and stuff like this or whatever? They want to whitewash the history of this country and the brutality in which it was built upon. That's the
And
reality
it's
of it
still
all.
brutal.
Yeah, and so my thing is, I think not that you want to put yourself in a position whereby you're constantly beating down a class of people, but recognizing this is how people were treated so that you don't go back into that same mindset. How do you
Or
in
accept it.
exactly, how do you bring this into racism? Because you see a lot of stuff going on internally, and the other side seems to think that the way to do it is to erase the history of certain things. You know,
Pretend it never happened and never occurred, or to
exactly.
deny it, like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or to
Yeah.
change how, so if something was 5 minutes, then they're like it was 30 seconds. I mean, just the changing of that changes the aspect of
Mm-hmm.
what
Yeah.
was involved.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Now, what's your thought on that in terms of how we deliver history? How do we teach history?
How do we keep
Oh,
it, Professor Singleton?
Mm-hmm.
well, first of all, the teaching of history has to start at home. It has
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm.
has to start at home. Now, I can enhance what was taught at home, but um, it has to be taught at home, and then they have to be the students have to be given um, a true version of American history as well as world history. You have some states like Florida where they're teaching that Black folks benefited from slavery,
Yes.
which is which is a complete fallacy.
Yeah.
And so this is something that we discuss in our department meetings, and that is, we don't know what the kids were taught,
Mm.
when they come to us.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to make sure that that they're taught properly, without a lot of untruths being conveyed to them. They have to be taught history, as it really happened. And
Mm-hmm.
they have to be given a perspective that may, in some instances, be a little upsetting
Mm-hmm.
to some folks, but they have to
Triggering
be
in some
told to be
cases.
Mm-hmm.
truth. They have to be told the truth.
Right. And see, this is where this whole America 250, this celebrating 250 years, we got this Virginia 250. Um,
Yes.
we've just gone through a lot of that stuff and all, and they had all of the tall ships coming in and everything. You could tour the ships. Of course, my thing was, I'm gonna let them keep on passing by. Last time some of my folk got on them ships, it
They
ain't
wanted to jump off, baby.
right,
They chose
right,
death over,
right.
yeah.
Life changed on them tall ships for some people, So
And
my
the
thing is,
bottom of them ships.
that's it. I don't want to tour it. If it doesn't have a casino on it and a nice shuffleboard and a pool, I don't want to be on that boat. You hear what I'm saying at all?
I struggle with those type of activities. And my husband is always saying, come on, let's get on a cruise. And I can't drink all that water. And
Mhm.
I think about all the things that happen in that water and
Mm-hmm.
how people
Mm-hmm.
go missing, the lawlessness of the
Mm-hmm.
water and things that occur. I cannot get my body up there. And I know it sounds like a good time, but I think about the trauma.
Mm-mm, the cruise ship is fine, but when they
Yeah.
just did those tall ships coming in and everything. When they did that years ago too, I said no, okay, I can appreciate the history of it because I think
Mhm.
my perspective has been you need to know the history, okay, and you need
Correct.
to understand the history, but there's no reason to celebrate the mistreatment of people. You know what I mean? And I think that's where we
Yes.
have the difference is in opinions of understanding what it means to teach the history versus to celebrate because there was a lot of controversy and still controversy around removing some of the Confederacy,
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
statues and stuff like
Statues.
that. There were some people that said it's a part of our history, leave it up. There were some people who said no, tear it down.
Mm-hmm.
What's your position on that, Professor Singleton?
Well, initially, I was of the mindset that these statues, and I still am, need to be taken down
Mm-hmm.
and actually sent to museums in Egypt where they can be placed side by side with statues of the pharaohs, because both of them are symbols of human bondage and misery.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I kind of took a deeper look at it that
I
way.
mean, you
But
Look, he said put him on
he
the
went
boat.
totally left with that one. He went totally left with that one. He was
Put him
like,
on the
let me
boat and send
further
him back.
educate you
all right, and need to put them
in the
right beside the
similarities.
pharaohs.
Yes.
But I certainly in all seriousness, I certainly understand. But these statues, they should be removed from public spaces and placed on private property.
Mm-hmm.
Unless
Mm-hmm.
it's a museum,
Mm-hmm.
where you're giving some kind of context to the statue, but
Mm-hmm.
they should not be in a public square like in Portsmouth and all of that. Those statues should be taken down, as well as the tax exempt status for a lot of these organizations that celebrate the Confederacy. They shouldn't have a tax exempt status.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm of that
They should have to
mindset.
pay for their hate.
That's a good
Mm-hmm.
point. That's a good point. I
Mm-hmm.
actually
Hate
photographed
should be pricey.
some of the demonstrations in Hampton Roads when they were taking down the Confederate monuments,
Mm-hmm.
and when we had our symposium during Black History Month. I put together a slideshow where I showed the students in the community some of the actions that have been
Mm-hmm.
taken by members of our community against those statues.
Mm-hmm.
And they're excellent examples of protest art when they're shown, in a
Mm-hmm.
damaged format. But and again, that is an entirely different category of art,
Mm-hmm.
protest art. So
Mm-hmm.
that
That would
was
be an
very
interesting
interesting.
class, Professor Singleton. That would be a very interesting class.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I could see a combination between the history department and the art department. And that'd
Mm-hmm.
be nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Well,
that's a great
mm-hmm.
idea. It's a
But
great idea.
being from Richmond, grown up, born and raised in Richmond and all, um, Monument Avenue for us,
Mm,
we knew what that was all about and all.
mm.
Um, and so as we look at it, it was a part of the history, and that's why I asked the question in terms of how do you celebrate, how is it revered? Put them in a museum somewhere so that you can see it and acknowledge it. But we're not celebrating it. You know what I mean? Because that is, an injustice at that point.
Absolutely,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
And so that's the piece you have to ask yourself. And I remember having this conversation with someone as we talked about this in terms of they're saying, well, on one hand, you know, we're saying don't teach that slavery was bad, that blacks benefited from slavery. But then on the other hand, we're saying get rid of the monuments, you know. So it's like you can't have it both ways. It's like, no, you're not necessarily having it both ways. You're telling it. And I think history needs to be told and taught, number one. But when you have a situation where there's reverence given to that time period, like it was so great, you know, that whole let's make America great again, to what? You know, to what are you trying to
Whew,
say?
I
Let,
just broke
let's
out in hives.
let's speak on that. You know what I mean? And so that's the
Yes.
piece we have to talk about, that we are not celebrating slavery. We're not celebrating the oppression of civil rights. We're not celebrating the Confederacy, you know, and that's the piece that we have to look at, because even as it related to in Virginia, how of course we were looking at Martin Luther King Day. At one point, it was Lee Jackson King Day, you know, because they were
Yes.
trying to satisfy the believers in that Confederacy at that point, you know, and
That
it
we
was.
have already fought and won.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, and so you have to look at what does that mean and all as it relates to history. And so as much as I always tell folks, you know, because my wife is a history buff in the house, she's a social studies teacher, you know.
Oh, wow.
So we talk about that stuff or whatever. I'm not a big history person, but she always laughs and say, you surely do got a whole lot to say about history. And I have to just look at her and smile and say, I got a whole lot to say about a little bit of everything. But but here's the thing. We have to look at history and the lessons that we can learn from history. And I think that's a key point for our younger generation. You know.
Absolutely. And I have to throw a big shout out to several of my colleagues. One, Senator Dr. Mamie Locke, who's
Mm-hmm.
in my department.
Mm-hmm.
She got the bill pushed through that set up the African Landing Memorial. And I believe I
Mm-hmm.
saw Dr. Williams there
Yeah,
at the
we were there.
ceremony. And
Hmm.
also and our own Dr. Wanda Tucker in our department. She's a
Mm-hmm.
direct descendant of one of the first Africans who was born in the
Mm-hmm.
United States and who was on that vessel when it arrived. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times our students don't know that when they say the first Africans arrived in Jamestown in 1619, um, map making and cartography has gotten a lot better since
Mm-hmm.
1619. So today, they actually say that when the early historians were saying Jamestown,
Mm-hmm.
they really meant Hampton, Virginia.
Right.
Yeah, so
And that was it Calvin Pearson, I think, who pushed that? You know,
I
and
believe so.
yes, Calvin Pearson as a historian pushed that for years and was trying to make sure people understood what
Hmm.
the correct history was. It wasn't the Jamestown settlement. It was right here at Port Comfort, you know, right there over
Correct.
at Fort Monroe, you know, and he fought for that for years to have that marker and everything, you know, because if you're going to tell the history, tell it correct. And I
That
remember
is
having a
true. That is
conversation with him
true.
about that. And he talked about that for a good number of years. And so I was glad to see the movement to get the story told correctly, you know, happen and was definitely put in place.
They
Yes,
took
and
something that was not at all beautiful and they made a beautiful memorial of something that was not at all beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, absolutely. And
Mm-hmm.
I took some photos and I even wrote an article on this event and was published in the New Journal and Guide newspaper. So I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to make sure I had something written for the historical record. So
Mm-hmm.
years from now, if someone is researching it and they go to the archives of the African American newspaper, they'll see something um, that I wrote and also that other members of the Hampton University department, contributed to. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm just glad uh, to have been able to do something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That changes how I think about when I see you now on campus. And when you're around, I'm going to start asking you a little bit more questions. Like, okay, what we need to learn about today, or what is happening around here today that is going to be significant moving forward. So your
Yes, ma'am.
pictures are more than just capturing what's happening. You're making history.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because
You're
also
preserving history.
Mm-hmm.
that too, but also as a teacher, I always remember um, students tend to be visual learners because you have Dr. Mason certainly
Mm-hmm.
knows this is from the public school. Uh, there are three modalities, you know,
Mm-hmm.
visual learning, um, auditory hearing, and
Mm-hmm.
then tactile, you know, where they're
Mm-hmm.
touching,
Mm-hmm.
feeling, creating things. So
Mm-hmm.
most folks tend to be visual learners. So if you can take a picture and then analyze it and interpret it, that means more to the students. You get into a higher level of thinking. Political cartoons are also great
Mm.
for that. So
Mm-hmm.
we always try to use political cartoons in our learning environment because it
Mm-hmm.
captures their attention and it makes the students think.
Mm-hmm. And that's why museums are so important you
Mhm.
know, when you think about, what is it that you put in museums and all, and just being able to go through visually. They have the little caption cards that tells you a little bit about what's going on, and they'll have little videos sometimes and stuff like that or whatever. But to be able to walk through the museum and see what happens and what was going
Mhm.
on at that particular time and stuff like that or whatever, that certainly leaves an imprint on the brain, or you can think about some things. I've visited the African American Museum twice, and I'm certainly
Yes,
going
sir.
back again. Um, but the information in there, and the different time periods and everything. Of course, most people talk about the civil rights movement and all, and just being able to sit in awe, just to touch a moment of time visually, and some of the things that were captured at that moment. It certainly created emotions and feelings about that particular time, and it stirred up a lot of stuff in people as people talked about their visits to the African American Museum and all. And so we certainly do need that information captured in so many different ways. We can write about it, but the photography, the picture taking and stuff like that or whatever, certainly adds to the experience, the learning component of that, about those time periods. So thank you for capturing those things on
You're
by
welcome. You're
photography.
welcome.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome because a lot of times I'll bring those pictures into class and show the students. Uh, for example, I love taking pictures at graduation, and to
Mm-hmm.
my freshmen, I'll show the pictures of the president, uh, the first lady, the provost, and I told the provost,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Stewart, I said, I showed the students a picture of you so I could educate them on who you were if they saw you on campus to speak to you and know who you are. And she said, they don't know me. But that type of thing is very beneficial. So I really enjoy doing that because
Mm-hmm.
Abigail Spanberger came to our convocation the other year, and now she's the governor. So I can show them pictures of our convocation
Mm-hmm.
and and then also remind them of certain things that the president of Hampton University tends to tell them. Like, for instance, I'll ask the students, I'll say, when the president of Hampton says to you all 1-8, what are you supposed to say back to him? And uh,
6-8.
and they
Mm-hmm.
said six
Right.
eight, and and I asked the students, what's going on in the country in
Mhm.
1868?
Mm-hmm.
They said Reconstruction, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what I was covering. And I told the students, that's going to be your essay question on the final exam. Explain how you
Mm-hmm.
are undergoing Reconstruction
Mhm.
at Hampton University. That's your
Mm-hmm.
essay question. So I try to tie in um, American history or schools
Mm-hmm.
history into something that they can relate to so they know what Reconstruction is. How are they
Mm-hmm.
being changed? How are they being reconstructed
Mm-hmm.
at Hampton
Mm-hmm.
University? So they didn't know I was coming at them like that.
Yeah. I like how you bring in the psychological aspects to that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
It's your
you. Thank you.
training. It's your training. You didn't even
Mm-hmm.
know it. It's coming in,
Right,
but
right.
that makes it resonate and more personal for them.
Yeah, and I
And
saw
I'm
the
thinking about
president.
your pictures too. Like I'm like this picture that came out recently this past weekend over the 4th of July, since we are talking about that in the Capitol, and we had the one young black lady that was sitting in that train,
Oh, yes.
surrounded by all those people. I can imagine, just you taking pictures like that to help tell those type of stories.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And we were very fortunate as a university for years. Um, Over 40 years, I think Ruben Burrell, took a lot of pictures for the university, and being
Yes.
able to really look at how he captured the growth of Hampton over time. I always tell students, when I was in school, we would go to the Peabody room and see the Peabody collection and all. And
Uh-huh.
so we would see a lot of the history stuff. We couldn't check it out or anything like that, but to be able to go in there and look at, historical information made a big difference. And it made a big difference in my experience here at Hampton. So I know professors used to always give, like I said, Dr. Johnson would send us to the Peabody collection for different assignments and stuff like that or whatever. But, just like, we appreciate Mr. Burrell for his years of service and picture taking. We thank you so much for what you're
You're
doing
welcome. My
here on this
honor. My
campus
honor.
and all. And I've learned quite a bit more about you as well. We've always had some great interaction through the years and all, but there were some things I learned about you today sitting at the table. So, like I said, thank you for what you've done in public education and what you're continuing to do on campus. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. My honor.
Well, I've
Absolutely.
enjoyed myself at the table here. I always tell folks this is truly the most delicious hour in radio. So, but anyway, I'm Dr. Richard Mason.
I'm Dr. Tamara Williams.
Join us right back here next week. WHOV 88.1 FM, smooth 88.1 FM.
The essence of HU.
Keep your fork.
Someday we'll be able to measure the power of words. I think they are things. I think they get on the walls. They get in your wallpaper. They get in your rugs, in your upholstery, in your clothes, and finally into you.
Thank you for joining us at the table.
Tune in next Sunday at 1 p.m. for more delicious topical recipes for life on the Sunday Brunch.
On Smooth 88.1 WHOV.